Hello, Fiveable friends. So today we're going to be talking about what's new for AP World History, which I lovingly refer to as WHAP. May need a name change, right? Because it is now AP World History Modern. I saw one of my friends is going to call it WHAM. I enjoy that. I think that one is cute. So we are going to today go over what's new for World History AP. And of course, there's quite a few things that are new for this school year. And some of us are still kind of wrapping our brains around what's going on. That's new in the class. And that's why we're here. We're here to help. So this is for teachers and for students. I feel like a lot of people coming in and watching today are going to be teachers because we are kind of just getting started in the rhythm of school and getting used to the new content and what's new in AP World History, kind of trying to wrap our mind around it. If you are a student, welcome. For you, some of the information about what used to be in AP World History won't be so relevant for you, but it's absolutely great if you're in here joining with us because it is also just going to be a good course overview about the new AP World History Modern class. So teachers and students, all welcome. My name is Allie Thiessen. I'm originally from Omaha, Nebraska. I taught AP World History for the last 6 years. I have been teaching for 8 years in Bellevue, Nebraska, just outside of Omaha, Nebraska. But like I said, I'm currently in Germany. I'm civilian, not military. I'm living in a town called Ulm. And so we're on kind of a different schedule over here. And I'm so happy to be connecting with people from all over the world with Fiveable. And so today, lots of changes we're going to be discussing. Some of us are probably, beating ourselves up over all of them. But just remember that it is a new class, but it's still technically the old class. And so we just have to remember as teachers that we are doing what we think is best for our students. And students, we want you guys to know that your teachers are doing what they think is best as well. And it's always difficult wrapping our head around these new changes because it did come seemingly very quickly when the content and the resources were released. And there's other Fiveable streams that I'll direct you to. There was one just recently about AP Classroom. So if you haven't watched that one yet, go back and watch it on the replay if you don't know how to use that as a teacher and using those resources there. But there are also going to be some other streams coming up that will also be useful for you. So just remember that even though there's new and it's changes and it's kind of overwhelming, that there's a lot of resources out there, especially here with Fiveable. We're here to support you and be like a community of learners, which we all need. We all need a community, especially when we're going through difficult changes and challenges with a new course structure. So today, what we're going to be talking about is just an overview of the changes. Now, the changes I've kind of categorized for us. The first one is, of course, the big one, the periodization. If you did not know, the course got chopped down, got the axe chopped down into a new AP World History Modern. We don't quite know what's going to happen with the AP World History Ancient. That's kind of down the pipeline. Oh, I just want to throw out there as well, I am not a College Board representative. I am just an AP World History teacher, not necessarily the blind leading the blind, but I'm here to help kind of guide you through these changes. Unfortunately, you cannot direct any hate mail towards me. I'm not a representative. And so we're just going to kind of go over these changes with the periodization, changes to the unit and topic layout, additional changes to the course themes, which you may or may not have been aware that there were changes in the themes. And then because the periodization has changed, the exam periodization and weighting has also changed. And so all of these things we're going to touch on individually. And then throughout this whole video, I do have just a few ideas to share. And because I don't want to be so much of like pounding the changes into your head. I want you guys to be able to have something that's going to be able to take with you how you can adapt to these changes and ways that you can incorporate them as a student at home or in your classrooms, and then as teachers trying to deal with teaching it maybe a little bit differently than you have in the past, or just adapting things that you've already had in the past to what the course is demanding now. And yes, the struggle is real. So before I go ahead and get into these changes, please share in comments if there are any kind of major concerns that you have about the class. Please feel free to ask questions. That's why I'm here, to help kind of guide you through these questions. If I don't have an exact answer, I'll be sure to look and reference it up for you, just so we can have utter clarity on what we're going through with these changes. And so please feel free to ask away in the comments, ask any questions that you have at any time during the live stream. So anytime you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and ask them. So that's a little bit about what we're going to be doing. So let's hop into these changes. Now, first thing first, I'm just going to explain what these changes are briefly, and then we'll go into them more in detail during the video. So the first most obvious change is our change to our periodization for AP World History. We went from the entirety of the world history from foundations to today, and we have cut it down more than half into what is now going to be 1200 to today. And so that's our first big change, is with periodization. Now with the periodization change, because we've cut it down so much from just now to 1200 to today, how the class is organized and structured into time periods also changed. And so we went from 6 time periods that were really just chronologically based to just 4 time periods in history. And they're going to be divided up a little bit differently. And that's going to be a huge challenge for a lot of people, is just the terminology and the verbiage of what College Board is using now, and how they're organizing and structuring the class may be different than what we've been using in the past. And so kind of trying to, connect what we have been doing and the terms we've been using to the new ones, it's a little bit of a challenge. That in mind, because we've cut down our periods, they've also changed how they're divided up. So previously we had what we called the key concepts. So each time period of the 6 time periods had a list of key concepts, things that students are supposed to know within that unit, that we had to make sure as teachers we were teaching, and students, you had to know because that's what was going to be assessed on the AP history test. So now that we are down to 4 periods, what they've done is they've subdivided the periods into 9 different units. So it's not just one clear cut, these are all the key concepts for period 1. Now the new period 1 has 2 units within it. And then within those units, they have topics. And in some of the units, there's 10 topics. And in one of the units is really dinky, there's only 4 topics. And so again, that's just kind of a change in how we have to think about how we organize our class, and using the terms and equating them to what we used to know. And again, students, you won't know any different. And so that's kind of a good thing for you, unless you had an older sibling or somebody who's helping you out who took it previously, and then you're like, oh, don't need those things. Another change that people may not know a ton about is the additional theme in our course themes. So previously we had 5 themes that were kind of like our subcategories for learning about history. And so now they've added an additional 6th theme. So there's 6 themes now, and I'll kind of go over a little bit later about what that 6th theme is and how to address the theme. Also, with this course themes, they did kind of change the wording of them. It's not going to be a huge difference for you and how you're using it, but there is a slight change in how they phrased the themes. And then finally, the exam periodization. Because we're down to just 4 periods of AP World History Modern from the 6, the course weighting is different. So before it was really nice and easy. I thought how the periodization was easy was because we knew that period 1 and 2 together were 20%, and then 3, 4, 5, 6 were all 20% to make 100. And now it's each of the units that are going to be a different percentage on the test. And then on the questions, if you remember last year how we had on the AP test, the short answers, we knew which ones would be from what time period. And then same thing for the long essay question, we knew what time periods those choices were going to come from. And so because we have new time periods, obviously those are going to be some changes in the exam as well and reflecting those changes. So those are kind of the overview. If you need to take like a little picture of this screen, I think that would be a great thing. It's just kind of keep in your back pocket. These are the 4 ways we're going to discuss today. So let's get to the big one, periodization. Now, previously, we had 10,000 years of world history from foundations to today. And so a lot of teachers started the year with Neolithic Revolution, humans organizing into civilizations. And that was a really easy place to start because we could start history with, people's history and written history and culture and societies. And now we're kind of jump in somewhere in the middle. So because we had so much history, we organized it previously into 6 periods of history. And those 6 periods were, some of them were huge because they had just a lot of history within those time periods. And a lot of teachers had some great ways to organize those periods. I know what I used was some handy dandy. I had these anchor charts that had acronyms for each of them, like GERMS was one of them to remember the periodization. And so those things we're just going to have to, as teachers, kind of rework a little bit. Because now we are in AP World History Modern, which is starting at 1200, kind of circa 1200, and it's going up to today. Now, when I say it's going up to today, I don't necessarily mean like today, the day of the test in May. They're going to have information on there. The questions kind of end. The time frame is 2001, but you can technically use things that are going to continue in that modern age to today. And so now, because of this, we have just 1200 years, or 1200 to today. We're divided just into 4 time periods. And so understanding those time periods are going to be different. If you're an AP student, comment. If you're a student in here, comment if you're a student. Because my helpful hint for students when they go to studying for the AP test, what I always would direct my kids to is like looking up things online, like look up if you're struggling with this time period, like Google it and maybe look up some like flashcards or something from that time period. Don't do all the work yourself. Well, this is going to be difficult if you're a student and it comes AP test time and you start Google searching, period one flashcards. And so if you're looking at period 1 flashcards and they're from last year's period 1, it's not going to be something that is going to be super helpful for you this year. And so just keep that in mind when it comes to going back and trying to look up information and using the periods. It's going to be a little bit difficult because some of the stuff is not going to be directly equal. So looking at period 1 stuff now isn't the same as period 1 used to be. And so, yeah, a lot of resources are updating, but it takes time because we're all kind of dealing with these changes that did happen over the summer, which everybody loves when the changes happen over the summer. And thank you, Dylan. Yep, we got tons of great resources out there. Fiveable is another one, of course, to use. And we're going to help you kind of go through all of these changes as well. But just a word of caution, if you're a Googler, when you go to Google to study, just be careful that you're looking up the information for today's periods. And with these changes to our periodization, we have our 4 time periods that aren't necessarily called by the time periods anymore. We used to have such focus on time period. And so now it's more about the units, which I'm going to get to in a little bit. What I'm looking at, if you can see in my little screen over here, AP College Board sent out this kind of your course at a glance. And I'm such a nerd. Look, you see what I did? I taped it up on my wall in my office. Maybe if you're a student, maybe your teachers have that. Or if you're a teacher, did you hang this up too? I keep having to reference it because I keep mixing up the terms in my head. So I'm so used to talking about periods in my class. I'm always like, okay, we're on period 4 and we're going to take a period 4 summative test and a period 4 DBQ. And now I have to kind of get that out of my mindset a little bit because it's less about period and more about units. So let's just kind of explain what the new periods are, and then I'll get into the units and how they're divided. You may call these by totally different names. So period 1 is where we're starting off circa 1200 to 1450. This is the first time period for the new class that's going to be tested. But as I'm going to explain here in a little bit, I'm going to talk a little bit about period 0, which sounds so cool. And period 1, post-classical, you may call it by like Middle Ages or medieval time period. But period 1 is 1200 to 1450. And so this is also not a normal division from last year. Last year, this time period, I believe, went 600 CE to 1450 CE. And so now we're kind of plopping in 1200 so that we can start a little bit early with like the Mongols to include them in there. And so 1200, it feels like just kind of a plop. But here we are, 1200 to 1450. This new time period will have 2 units in them. And again, I'll explain the units in just a bit. Time period 2 is early modern history, and this is the same periodization that we used to have, 1450 to 1750. So any of the information that you used last year in period, what we called period 4, I believe period 4, 1450 to 1750 is early modern. And this time period for our new AP Modern class is going to have units 3 and 4 in them. The next time period, oh my gosh, I forgot to put a 3 in there. Period 3 is modern, which is 1750 to 1900. And so this one was our old, what we would call time period 5. And last but not least is period 4, and that's our contemporary time period, and that is circa 1900 to today. And again, kind of 2001, but you can include information that is currently going on. And that encompasses units 7, 8, and 9. So period 1, 2, and 3 have 2 units in them, and then period 4 has 3 units for just 100 years. It's pretty fun. So period 1, I'm just going to kind of go through a quick overview about what's in each period, and then we'll go through some more of these changes. Later, I'm going to have a video, I think actually tomorrow is this video. Tomorrow, same time, I'm going to have a video, kind of an overview, including period 0, which was previously taught, and period 1, kind of how to tackle those. So please join me tomorrow too. So a little bit about period 1. Period 1, unit 1, they're calling the global tapestry. And a better name for this would be the global hodgepodge, because it really is kind of difficult because you're technically starting at 1200, but if you don't pre-teach anything before 1200, it's going to be really, really difficult. And so period 1, unit 1 for students also, the biggest thing that I want you to focus on as a student is getting acquainted with terminology. You're going to hear a lot of new vocab terms. Terms that were actually introduced before 1200 that you're going to have to kind of understand how they're being used now. And so having a good understanding of like world religions and ideologies and previous empires, those things are going to be super helpful to just understand unit 1, because otherwise it is going to feel a little bit like, and now we're going to this area of the world, and now this area, here, there. But unit 1 is kind of setting the stage. It's the global tapestry. And like I said, with the weighting, it's not just for period, it's by unit. So 8 to 10% of the exam weighting is going to be from unit 1, period 1. Unit 2 is networks of exchange. Networks of exchange is a little bit easier both to teach from a teacher's point of view and to learn, because it really is going to be focused and driven on trade networks and connections of people. And I just think that's something that students are going to grasp a little bit easier than the global tapestry. So Unit 2, Period 1, Unit 2 is also going to be 8 to 10% of the exam. So altogether, Period 1 has 2 units, and altogether it's going to be maybe 20% of the exam or less. I don't know why we have kind of a range in there. I think it's just because we have 9 units that they're dividing up as opposed to 6 easy time periods. And so it's just a little bit of a range of how much is going to be on the test. But about 20% is going to come from Period 1, 1200 to 1450. Period 2 is, I'm also going to have 2 units in it. Remember, Period 2 is going to be 1450 to 1750. So Period 2's first unit is Unit 3, and it is about land-based empires. So when learning about these land-based empires, again, you're going to have a little bit of background knowledge still even for Period 2, and because being able to understand context is so important in this time period. So Unit 3 on land-based empires is going to be between 12 and 15% of the exam. So as you can see, Period 2 is going to be weighted more than Period 1. And then their second period 2 unit is Unit 4 on transoceanic interconnections. So kind of like Period 1, second unit was about networks of exchange. Unit 4 is divided by these transoceanic interconnections. So exploration and trade and connections overseas. And this also is going to be another 12 to 15% of the exam weighting. So it could be 30% of the exam in Period 2. So as you can tell, they're putting more emphasis on Period 2 than they are on Period 1. And that's also going to be reflected a little bit in the exam changes, which I'll get to at the end. Period 3 is now 1750 to 1900. Period 3 also has 2 units in it. The first unit is Unit 5 on revolutions. Also 12 to 15% of the exam weighting. And then Unit 6 is about consequences of industrialization, which is 12 to 15%. I personally, from a teacher perspective, think that Period 3 is going to be a little bit of a challenge to organize from the teacher point of view, because it's important as students that students understand that this is all going on at the same time period. And my fear is by like kind of chopping it up in this way and doing like political revolutions and then just focusing on industrialization and social economic changes, I'm worried that students are going to forget that these are going on at the same time. And so as a teacher, I would just be really cognizant of understanding that this is all within the same time period so that students don't kind of delineate them too much. Next is our last period, which is Period 4. Period 4 is now our last time period, which is 1900 to today. And Period 4 has 3 units. So it's only 100 years of history, but it's got 3 units in it. And so obviously this one is going to be the most profound for students and for teachers. And so it's really important as a teacher not to rush this at the end. Now we technically have more time to teach on the years of history since our years have cut down, but we got to make sure that we don't just cram Period 4 in at the end because it is such an important part of the AP test. So Unit 7 is on global conflict, 8 to 10% of the exam weighting. Unit 8, Cold War and Decolonization, another 8 to 10%. And then Unit 9 is globalization, which is a final 8 to 10%. If you try to go back and add these up on the maximum, it's not going to add to 100. I sat down, I was like, how are we getting to 100% of the exam? But, you know, I guess we'll kind of wait and see a little bit on the test how this is going to play out in the multiple choices. And just, I know that Period 1 obviously is going to be the least impactful. Period 3, Period 4, most impactful, including Period 2. But having that good foundation is so important. So let's talk about some ideas. In comments, teachers, students, also, if you have any ideas to contribute, please help us out. We are a community of lifelong learners just trying to survive at this point for AP World Modern. So my first idea is something that's a little bit controversial, and that's about teaching things that aren't in the class. And that's kind of a funny way to say it. We're going to teach things that aren't tested on. But as historians, we can't just plop ourselves into history and just see where it is. Where are we in history? What are we learning about? We know that history is fluid and that these periods and units are completely man-made. Some human has decided this is how we're going to divide up history and this is how we're going to teach it. And it is helpful, of course, in course planning and for organizing lesson plans and unit plans. But it's also important to really emphasize that history is not so linear like this, that we just can't jump into 1200 and know what's happening in the world. And so I personally think it's important to pre-teach as much as possible into this kind of period zero. And you don't have to go so in depth with everything, but I do think it's important for students to understand where we've come from, to understand where we're going. So if you are a teacher, in comments, let me know if you are teaching period zero, if you're going to teach things that are pre-1200. This also, I think, has to do with kind of timing of your classes. If any of you people are going to be teaching as a semester, oh, bless your hearts. And you probably won't have as much time to pre-teach. But for me in Nebraska, we start school like the second week of August. So we have a lot more time that I can spend to pre-teach the foundations. And some people are teaching essentially the same content that they used to teach and are just emphasizing the modern time periods more, which is absolutely fine. Now with the units and how the units are divided, it's not so much chronological, it's kind of more by theme, which makes it a little bit difficult because like I was talking about in that new period too about, it has like revolutions and then industrial revolution. And it's really hard to kind of delineate history in that way by the units. And so if you don't want to necessarily teach with the units, you don't really have to. You can still teach chronologically by period and just make sure you're hitting everything that's in the units. Teachers also, I think it's important to assess more often. If you're just going to do 4 assessments and just do a period 1 test, period 2 test, 3 and 4, I do think it's important also to do some unit testing, but it's totally up to you of how you're dividing up the class. I also think it would be a good thing for students to have that experience with the large period test. And let's say you're going to do a period 3 test from 1750 to 1900, and you're going to incorporate both of those units and all of the topics in those units. I think that's a great way for students to kind of practice incorporating more history and kind of going across themes. And then students, check in with your teachers on how they plan to organize the class and then roll with it. If your teacher is gung-ho that they're going to teach all of the previous history, do it because they're doing it with a purpose. Teachers around the world are really having to deal with these changes and they're deciding what's best. And so as a student, I just want to encourage you to go with it. Your teachers know their clientele, you guys, their students, and what they feel is most important from a historian's perspective to teach. And so if they want to start in 1200, if they want to start in foundations, wherever they want to go, just kind of roll with it. Trust their professional judgment a little bit. All right, now this is what I think is the most confusing part. So are you buckled in? Because it's a ton of stuff I'm going to go over. And it really is, if you haven't gotten your AP Binder, teachers, it's also just available in a PDF format on AP College Board's website. But this is where my lovely chart comes into play. And it's just kind of organizing these things in your head and with the new units and new layouts with the topics. They aren't using key concepts anymore. That's the biggest change for me because I organized everything by key concept, and now having to go back and reorganize the key concepts aren't the right numbers obviously anymore. They're not even using the phrasing key concepts. Now they're going to use topics. And so it's a little bit to wrap our head around. So what was it before? Before, we had our 6 time periods of history, and then in each of those time periods, we had key concepts. And those key concepts they weren't brief. There was a lot of information in those key concepts. So we had the key concept, and then we had like illustrative examples, and those are things that I would use to make sure that I was teaching what I needed to teach and that students were learning what they needed to learn. I used to print out the key concepts and make my students use those as like study tools. So now gone are the key concepts, and now we're calling them topics within each unit. So now not only do we have a new phrase for unit, now we have a new phrasing topics. So how we used to think of it, time period, key concepts. Now it's time period, unit, topic. Does that make sense? That's why I like my chart. That's why I keep it up on my wall, because I get so confused. Oh, I'm so confused. But we're getting there. We have 9 units, and within each unit, we have 4 to 10 topics. So I already explained in the previous slides, if you need to go back and watch those, about what the units are. I'm just going to kind of go over what are the topics and what they look like. So the key concepts previously used to have a lot of words, which I actually liked, because then I could go through and make sure I was teaching the skills as well as teaching the content in there. But now if you look, these are the topics. So do you see where it says 1.1, 1.2, blah, 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 blah? All of those are topics. So this is unit 1. Unit 1 is in period 1. This is where we're starting the class if you're just jumping in at 1200, Global Tapestry. So there are 7 topics within unit 1. And so if your teacher is going to keep calling them key concepts, they're going to be key concepts. But these are the main points that AP College Board is expecting you to have for the AP test. So if you are a student, these are things that I would make sure that you have even written down somewhere that you can go back and refer to make sure that what you're studying is what they're wanting you to know for the AP test. So there are 7 units in Global Tapestry. And as you can see, when I mentioned before how it was kind of like we're going on a world tour from 1200 to 1450, it is a little choppy because they're just jumping us in at 1200. So it's a little bit of moving around the world. We're going to go to East Asia. We're going to go to Dar al-Islam. We're going to go Southeast Asia, the Americas, Africa, Europe. And then we're going to compare all of them. And so it seems really choppy. As a teacher, if you want to do this in a different way, do it. Just make sure you're hitting all of these at some point. Unit 2 is also in period 1. This one, I think, has a little bit more specificity. The other one, it's like developments. Well, what are the developments? What am I supposed to be teaching here? Unit 2 is a little bit easier to find what we should be teaching and learning. And same thing for really the rest of the units. So Unit 2, Networks of Exchange, also has 7 topics within each of these. And as you can see with these networks of exchange, they're just pointing out the different networks of exchange that we need to teach as teachers and that we need to learn as students. So going from the Silk Roads to Indian Ocean to Trans-Saharan. And then it also is kind of driving at some of the skills that you need and some of the themes that we're going to be talking about in just a bit. So cultural consequences, environmental consequences, and a little bit comparison about economics. Woot. This is our short one. When I said that the units were 4 to 10, I meant this one. Unit 3, Land-Based Empires, is the shorty. It's only 4 topics long, and it's all about empires. So we're going to learn about how they expand, how they're administered, what belief systems they have, and then we're going to compare all of them. Get used to that comparison. So a lot of these units. Unit 4 is in period 2 as well as Unit 3. and this one has 8. This one is an interesting division because it kind of starts with technology and then it kind of goes through some of the interconnections. And so we'll talk about exploration, we'll talk about Columbian exchange, maritime empires, and then of course, comparing them, learning another skill of continuity and change, and then looking at these from different themes. Unit 5 is a big one. Revolutions. There are 10 topics in Unit 5 on revolutions, and it kind of starts with political revolutions, talking about nationalism and political revolutions. Then it introduces the Industrial Revolution. And that's when I think, oh, great, we're going to incorporate both of these. And then we get to period 6, and I just get confused because it's more about industrialization. So it is like the effects of industrialization more in Unit 6, the consequences of industrialization. So we start with revolutions, political, and then we go into social economic, and now we are at the effects of industrialization, which again leads to more social, economic, political changes. And it does make it a little bit difficult because you as a teacher may want to organize this in a completely different way. And I'll talk about that in some of my ideas in a bit. Our last 3, 7, 8, 9, are all period 4, 1900 to today. So Unit 7 is global conflict, and this is obviously about World War I and World War II in this one. And so World War I and World War II, I think, is something that my students always struggle. They confuse in their head. My husband's a scientist. He has a PhD in biomedical sciences. I always joke around and ask him, hey, who did the U.S. fight in World War I? He has no idea. He gets confused with World War II. And so combining this into a unit, if I was teaching this, I would kind of subdivide it, maybe do some quizzes, separating them so that students can get them clear in their head since it's combined into one unit. Unit 8 is Cold War and decolonization. So post-World War II, up until about 1989 or so, I guess we're going to go up to. And then this is Cold War decolonization. As you can see, it kind of splits it, the Cold War a little bit, kind of starts with what is the Cold War, the effects of the Cold War, then it goes to decolonization, then it ends the Cold War. And so you may want to reorganize it a little bit for you or your students if that's something that you think is important to do. And finally, our last unit is Unit 9 on globalization. This is 1900 to today. And so some of these things are going to be during the Cold War. Some of these are going to be during even World War I and II, and then combining them and pushing them all the way to today. And so Unit 9 is going to be kind of rounding out history in modern age and what's going on even into current era. And so this one also, I feel like, is a little bit choppier. You're going to be kind of jumping around, looking at technology, looking at the economy, looking about political change, and then trying to connect backwards a little bit. So those are our new topics. You may still want to call them key concepts. If you want to, go for them, but it's not on my chart. They're calling them topics now in the units. So what are some ideas? You don't need to teach in the exact order. Just because College Board gives it to you in a chart doesn't mean you have to follow it to a T. You can, as a teacher, adapt and change. The other big issue I know I have is my textbook doesn't look like this. This isn't how my textbook is organized. My textbook is organized in a completely different format. And so if you are using your textbook or you're using a supplementary textbook, you may want to organize it in the way that mirrors the textbook, but don't forget about what these are doing. Don't forget to kind of go back and use it as kind of a check mark. Did I teach these things? And as a student, did I learn these things? If I didn't, I need to go back and reteach or relearn those things. If you are completely lost, College Board has a pacing guide in the binder in the course description. And then this chart also has a pacing guide on it. It says there's progress checks, and then it'll tell you in the binder how many lessons to do with each unit. And so if you are completely lost, you can go through and try the pacing guide. See if you like it. If you don't do it next year. And if you do, keep rolling with it. And we're just kind of trying new things, and don't be afraid to try new things. The other thing I want to point out, which I used to love in the old key concepts, is the illustrative examples were very easy to just kind of pick out. It's like, okay, what are the terms my students should know? What are like the empires they should know? And you can rely a little bit on the topics and the wording of the topics, but the illustrative examples are going to be really important because you don't want to forget something that could be on the test. In the binder or the course exam description, if you find it online, it's like in the margins. So you kind of have to look for it in each unit, saying illustrative examples in the margins will be like a little italicized. Don't forget to look back and use those to make sure that you're teaching everything that is going to be covered. All right, very briefly, let's go over the course themes. Sometime next week, I think next week, I'm going to have a completely separate lesson about teaching AP World History thematically. So check in with me next week and watch that video as well. But just an overview about the changes with the themes. So before we had 5 themes of history, and they were pretty easily divided, like social, economic, and now we have 6 themes. So they added one. And not only did they add one, they changed a little bit of the phrasing of the themes. So if you have like anchor charts or something like that had the old wording, they're still going to be fine. We just are going to tack on a little bit extra up in there with the additional theme. And the additional theme is technology and innovation. So if you're teachers out there, how did you tackle that before? Because technology and innovation, I kind of put in with like cultural and artistic changes is where I kind of had it. And so now it's a completely separate theme. Technology and innovation, we need to make sure that we're driving that theme home as well. So our new themes, theme 1 is humans and the environment. This is about how people interact with their environment and how their environment impacts them. Theme 2 is cultural developments and interactions. Theme 3 is governance, which I always just call political, but governance is fun too. Theme 4 is economic systems. Theme 5 is social interactions and organizations. And theme 6 is the new one, technology and innovation. So I'm just going to briefly touch on each of these themes. I'm mostly just looking at how the rewording is. If that changes anything for you, it really shouldn't change too much, but theme 6 is going to be the important one. And again, check back next week. I'll have a whole separate video about teaching with the themes and learning the themes. So the first theme is humans and the environment. So we're looking at how the environment shapes how people live in those areas. And then what I think College Board likes to focus on more is how humans have changed their environments. And so this is something that we've seen all throughout history. It doesn't need advanced technology to change your environment. Population growth changes environments. And so looking at humans and the environment is one theme that I think students and teachers kind of forget about. So make sure we're teaching this. Make sure that we're learning this and thinking thematically. Theme 2 is cultural developments and interactions. So this one, cultural developments, is kind of like how societies develop and create ideas and beliefs and religions, and then how those ideas, beliefs, and religions impact or influence a society from whence they came. And then we need to also take a look at it from the other way. How do those ideas, beliefs, and religions impact other themes? And so this theme, I think personally, is the most difficult of them because it's kind of hard to delineate from social, because we generally think of like, oh, in society. This one is more like, what do they develop and what impact does that development have externally and internally? Theme 3 is governance, or I call political. Governance is all about how empires or states, city-states even, grow, how they form, how they decline. It's about the policies and procedures that they use to administer, like how do they keep their power, how do they rule over other people, and then how do they maintain and exercise their power over different areas and different peoples. This is, I think, going to be a really big focus. I'm just throwing it out there. I think it's going to be a huge focus on the new AP World History Modern, because if we're starting in 1200, we're starting with like the Mongols, and we even have a whole unit just on empires. I mean, I think this is going to be something that's going to be super duper important. Just saying. Economic systems, this is how do people make and produce and exchange the goods and services that they need to survive. If they can't grow them or build them, where are they getting from? And how does the economy impact the society? And so if the economy is based on one particular thing, how does that influence how people live and interact with each other? Theme 5 is social interactions and organizations. Like I said before, this one is easy to confuse with the cultural developments, because they sound so similar. But social interactions and organizations, we're really looking at like social stratification, social hierarchy, like who's at the top of society, who's in the middle, who's at the bottom, and how do they get in those places? How or what kinds of social norms influence and distinguish each social group? And how each of those social groups influences politics, the economy, and culture, how politics, the economy, and culture also impact those social groups. So kind of the interexchange between those. Finally, here we are, the big one, the last one, the new one, theme 6, technology and innovation. This one I personally would always just kind of lump in with like cultural developments, because I would just think of them as like how societies created things. But here we're delineating in a separate topic. And I do think it is important, especially if we're just starting at 1200. And there's a lot of technology and a lot of innovations that have shaped human societies and have led to the changes in the modern era. And so because our focus is 1200 to today, I do understand that adding this theme and separating it is important. I get it. Just another thing to remember we have though. So we want to make sure that we are learning and studying the technological advances that have shaped human society. So learning from 1200, we can even go back a little bit, the different technologies that came from different areas, and then how those technologies impacted human development and interactions. And then of course, the big one that we're going to be focusing on our last unit 9, with globalization, we're talking about consequences of advances in technology, also a big one for the world wars. And so by separating this theme, I do think it's important, and it will also, I think, help students a little bit to separate and delineate this theme from the other social and cultural developments. So how are we going to tackle these new themes? You want to incorporate your themes throughout the entire course. On the handy dandy chart, they have it kind of listed which themes are in each. You can make sure that you're hitting those in the different topics, or just throughout the course, make sure that you are emphasizing the themes and that students are also emphasizing the themes by practicing identifying which theme is in that topic and unit. This is something you can do kind of early on in the school year, where you can hand out the first unit and have the students work together and try to pick out, well, okay, here's our global tapestry. What do we think this is going, what kind of themes do we think we're going to find in here? What do we think they are? And so kind of identifying themes and using the terms with the themes, I think is a good practice for students. And then I also think as a teacher and as a student to incorporate some graphic organizers to help differentiate the themes. One of the biggest struggles that I know my students do is like, they will get a question like an LEQ, and if it says political, they're gonna be talking about social just because they forget that term. They don't really know exactly what it means by that, and so they just kind of go off in la la land talking about whatever that they want to, whatever they know. And so practicing the terms of the themes and kind of differentiating the themes within the units, I think is an easy way to incorporate the themes more. And I'll have more ideas if you join me next week. Last but not least, you have survived already 50 minutes about the changes to AP World History. Good on you. Whew. Now that we've talked about all of the changes of our periodization, our new periods, our new units, our new topics, our new theme, how is this reflected in the AP exam? And so this is something that is kind of hidden, honestly. It's kind of hidden. I kind of looked this up and kind of had to dig through a little bit. So I've saved you a little bit. Now you don't have to dig and look it up like I did. So our old periodization of the exam, we had 6 time periods. And then on the exam, to make it easier for everyone, is they said that on the short answers, we're only going to have it from these time periods. On the LEQ, it's going to be this time period, this time period, and this time period. And so we used to have the old 6 periods reflected in the exam questions and mirrored that way. Well, guess what? We have new periods, we have new units, we have new topics. So how is that going to be reflected in the exam? Well, now our new 4 periods are going to be incorporated into the new exam content in the free response section. Go back a few slides and check back to where I went through the overview of the periods and what percent is on the exam weighting. So all those percentages of the exam weighting, where it was like 8 to 10 or 12 to 15%. That's how it's reflected, like in the multiple choice questions. And there's the good thing, you may think it's a good thing, there's no major changes to the exam layout. We still have multiple choice, we still have short answer, we still have long essay questions, we still have DBQs. Now that we have new content and new periods, that also has to reflect in what's going to be on the test and what types of questions. So this is going to be your handy dandy guide for what are the periods in where on the multiple choice. So if you don't know, helpful overview, 55 stimulus-based questions in 55 minutes. The multiple choice section of the exam is 40% of the whole exam. And so it reflects those exam weightings that I had in the previous slides. So where it said unit 1 was 8 to 10%, and unit 2 was 8 to 10%, unit 3, 12 to 15, unit 4, 12 to 15, unit 5, 12 to 15, unit 6, 12 to 15, unit 7, 8, and 9 are 8 to 10. Oh, I did that from memory. Are you guys proud of me? You should be proud of me. That's how it's going to be reflected in the multiple choice questions. Here's where it gets the complicated thing. Teachers, you can tell your students about this or not. I always tell my kids about it because I want them to understand the time periods that are more tested on than others. If we can't cheat the system, we gotta rig it somehow, right? So with the short answer questions, we have 3 short answer questions that we're going to answer in 40 minutes. It's worth 20% of the exam. So question 1 is the required question. It has a secondary source stimulus. This one is going to be anywhere 1200 2001. So that's no help at all. So it could be from anything in the new AP World History Modern class. Cool. Question 2 also required. It will have a primary source stimulus, also from any period in our new class. Great, narrowed it down for you. Thankfully, we get a choice for our 3rd question. We get to choose between question 3 or question 4. Neither one has a stimulus, so they're straight up questions. Question 3 will be from 1200 to 1750. And then question 4 will be something 1750 to 2001. So questions 1 and 2 on the short answer could be from anywhere, the entirety of the class. Question 3, we know is going to be 1200 to 1750, and question 4 is going to be 1750 to 2001. So wherever you feel more confident in learning, that's where you're going to go back and pick from. So that is reflected with the changes. So the question layout is the same, but again, the time periods are different from what was previously tested. Document-based question, we still are just going to have 7 documents. We still have 60 minutes, including a 15-minute reading period, and it's worth 25% of the exam. This also is a change because it's not 1200 to 2001. It's not going to be from anywhere in the time period for the class. The DBQ is now just going to be from 1450 to 2001. So yay, they shaved off 250 years. out of the content for the DBQ. So it's going to be something from 1450 to 2001. And finally, the long essay question. I think this is the most important of where the changes happened. The format is the same. We have 3 questions that we select one to answer in 40 minutes. We just won't write one essay, but we pick from 3 questions. This is worth 15% of the exam. This is where the big changes are coming with the time periods. So question 1 is going to be coming from 1200 to 1750. Question 2 will be 1450 to 1900. And question 3 will be 1750 to 1900. So again, it's pretty vague in there. We know that it could be one of the questions is going to be earlier time period. One of the questions is going to be kind of the middle time period. And one of the questions is going to kind of go from the late modern to today. So we kind of have a range. It used to be a little bit easier to say this from this period, or this period. So there is quite a bit of a range. As you guys can see, if you learned 1450 to 1750, it's a good time period to learn for the LEQ, because chances are it's going to have something from 1450 to 1750 just because where those time periods are landing. And so in how you're studying, you want to make sure that you're strong in all areas of history, obviously, but if you had to focus, really kind of focus on that 1450 to 2001. I hate saying that, but that's one way to kind of organize your studying. So let's go over a little bit of ideas. We know what the format and the periodization, the format is the same. The weighting of each exam part is the same. Do a lot of multiple choice practice. This is something that students hate doing because the multiple choice that you want to practice isn't going to be the multiple choice that's on the test. You're not just going to have like, in what year did World War I begin? See. You're going to have to do stimulus-based practice. And so working with documents is so important in all areas, but also working with documents for multiple choice is really, really good practice. So work with those stimulus-based questions. In terms of weighting, the DBQ is the next most important. So if we're kind of focusing on what we need to study, we need to do a lot of practice with documents, working with them for multiple choice, as well as working with them in the DBQ format. Practice writing a lot in all areas. Practice writing in timed essays, and getting as much practice as you can, kind of putting your thoughts into words. And finally, just a little plug in here, get to know your rubrics. The rubric language is the same from last year. That's another question I've been getting. The rubric is the same from last year. Even though our time periods are going to be different, there's still like contextualization on there and drawing from previous time periods. And so having a really global understanding of history is super duper important, and practicing with your rubric so that you know what's expected of you and how the readers are going to grade at the AP reading. Finally, we made it to the end. Raise your hand if you're really scared and overwhelmed by the changes. I feel this way too. It's really hard getting a class and I'm just kind of jumping into something that's a little bit of the unknown. So try not to get overwhelmed by the changes. Kind of take things in stride as much as you can. If you're a student and you've never had AP World History before, just roll with it. Trust that your teachers know what's going on. If they don't know what's going on, direct them to Fiveable and I will help them out. But trust your teachers as professionals that they're going to teach what they think is important and what that you should know is important. So kind of take it in stride. Don't say, well, what if, in previous years they did this? We all kind of have to take it with a little bit of a clean, fresh slate. Teachers, don't overwhelm yourself. If this first year you want to kind of use the previous language that you've had, go for it. If you want to organize it in the way you've had it, do it. Do what you think is best. There's so much change that it really can overwhelm you and can kind of defeat you. And we don't want that for teachers. I don't want that for my fellow teachers. I trust all my teacher peers to do what they think is best. Remember, as a teacher, you know your clientele, you know your students, and you know what they need most important. And don't get too overwhelmed by the changes and kind of lose, the forest for the trees. And this is still a great class with a global focus. And if you continue to drive this global focus for your students, they're going to still get a lot out of the class. So don't overwhelm yourself. Do things one thing at a time. Try to incorporate some changes as much as you can, but do what you think is best and really trust your teacher instincts. All right, guys, if you have any questions, please holla at your girl in comments. Let me know if you have any questions. I know that this was a lot to cover in just an hour because there are so many changes and it is so difficult to kind of take all of these things in. But if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me, reach out to me. You can follow us at Think5able on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And then you can shout out to me too on Twitter. That's my Twitter handle at Mrs. Thiessen. Again, if you need anything, please feel free to reach out to us. We're all in this together. Sorry, and you sat through an hour. Now you had to hear me sing High School Musical. That's okay. I hope you guys have a great start to your school year if you just started. I hope that you're not super overwhelmed by these changes. And I just want to make sure that you feel like you have a community of teachers and students that are ready and willing to help you here at 5able. So reach out to us anytime that you need anything, and we will see you guys next time.